أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما. I welcome you all with the big Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to the Global Association of Islamic Schools Scholar Series. This is what makes Global Association of Islamic Schools special. It is a unique opportunity for different educators from across the globe to connect for the one goal that they to have better Islamic education for our students and our future generations. I'm sure we've been joined by many people, and more people will be joining us from different parts of the world, and this is what GAIS is all about. So, Bismillah, I will be starting off with uh, an introduction to the session as well. Today we'll have a very Today we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Shoaib Malik, and he will be talking about the growing need to understand the relationship between modern science and Islam. And this is very important because lately we've been talking about and we've been bombarded with questions like atheism, evolution, uh, do aliens exist, and what would the ramifications of this would be in terms of Islamic teachings. So these are questions that sort of haunt our students and sometimes our Islamic schools as well, who are concerned for the well-being and the Islamic identity of our students. So inshallah, diving right in, I'll introduce our esteemed guest today. Dr. Shoaib is currently an assistant professor of environmental sciences at Zayed University in Dubai. He holds a PhD in chemistry and chemical engineering from the University of Nottingham, UK, and he holds a master's degree in philosophy of science and religion from the University of Edinburgh. Dr. Shoaib has authored many publications, two very prominent ones, which, of course, I'll be asking a few questions regarding them as well, are Islam and Evolution, Al Ghazali and the Modern Evolutionary Paradigm, which was published in 2021, and God, Information, and the World, the Metaphysics of William Dembski and Al Ghazali. This was published in 2019. So, without further ado, welcome to Dr. Shoaib.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Well,
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate yourself, Brother Fahad, and the rest of the team behind GAIS for allowing me to talk about Islam and science. It's an honor for me. I hope that what I'm about to share and discuss with you will hopefully provide benefit to the wider community, inshallah. I would like to request. There's a family member of mine. We just recently received the news. She has cancer. And we'd like to request if everyone can please pray for her. If there are many people watching, please do pray for that particular family member, inshallah. So without further ado, I'd like to share my screen. And this is something that I've prepared, that I've used the same presentation before. And this will hopefully be a rough overview of the field of Islam and science. And then we can use this as a prompt to latch on to certain questions that people may have. So as you said, let's make a start, inshallah. I don't know if I can play from the start. Can you see the entire thing? Just to be clear, can you see the whole thing? Is that all
yes,
good? Okay, great. Bismillah. So I have delivered a similar presentation like this before in various avenues, but this is the first time I'm doing this through GAIS. And what I like to do is just go through a few preliminary points on how to understand the nature of Islam and science. We will then go through like a historical review of what does the field of Islam and science look like. So believe it or not, it is now an active area in which academics, professors, ulama are looking into. And it has now become an important discussion, particularly in light of new challenges that Muslims are facing all across the world. We'll then use that to move into how do you go about teaching Islam and science, and then what are some of the challenges that Muslims are facing when it comes to engaging with this topic. and we'll then take any questions, inshallah, after that. So, just some preliminary points. When it comes to the pedagogy, we have to be aware that there are many layers to this conversation. We have the student level, we have the teacher level, the principal level, institution, and even how the nation affects these institutions. This is undeniable. I have been largely working on, for the past 7, 8 years, on the theoretical content of Islam and science. So, how do you, for example, look at the interface between Islam and evolution, Islam and quantum mechanics, Islam and aliens, and a variety of other things? Currently, I'm looking at artificial intelligence. That's the area that I'm looking into right now. And so most of my work has largely been looking into how does this work intersect with the teacher and the student level. What is it that the teacher needs to know? What is it the student needs to know? And how does that process look like? How does that knowledge exchange look like? I've been a teacher myself of Islam and science courses, as well as providing curriculum for other institutions. And this has been mostly the stuff that I've been looking at. More recently, however, particularly after meeting people in through GAIS and other circles, I have now come to realize that there also needs to be a consideration of the institutions involved. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's not one kind of Muslim institution. We actually have three key audiences in front of us. We have the university level, we have schools, so this is the high school system, and then we have also seminaries. And I've been engaging with all three in different parts of the world. So Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Pakistan, US, UK, Canada, Germany, Jordan, and a few other places. And it needs to be made very clear that people will have different content, objectives, student backgrounds, and even expectations, depending on which institution we are tackling with. Given that we are dealing, for this particular conversation, with high schools, I will mostly be tailoring my comments to that end, inshallah. So let's start off with the history of Islam and science. I mean, we can start the history of Islam and science all the way back to the origination of Islam, right? But I just want to look at this constructively so that people are aware in terms of what do I need to know and how do I quickly access this. The field of Islam and science, can be said, it started crafting itself, I think, bang on in the 1980s. And there were two key movements that started off during this era. One was known as the Islamization of the science movement, and this is, I think, a well-known thing that many of our peers know in the group. And this was a movement that gained a lot of traction. The fundamental message of this group was that a lot of the science that Muslim nations were importing from the West, because remember, a lot of the Muslim nation states did not exist 150 years ago. There was nothing like that. A lot of these are new states, and so in state development, there was constitutions that were being made, economic policies being made, social policies being made, political policies, but also education. How do we think about education today, right? And so when schools were being set up, Muslim world was lagging behind, and a lot of their curriculum was imported from the West. But some scholars said, this is problematic because the curriculum that we're importing does have issues with it. They have modern or Western loading into them, and this is why we need to Islamize the sciences that are coming in, and that's represented by this picture that you can see in front of you here. There were several people in this dialogue, but the four big ones are the four that you see here. Starting from the left, you have Sayyid Hussein Nasr. He is a professor at George Washington University. He's very aged now. I think he's in the 80s. Naqib al-Attas, who's a very famous Malaysian thinker. He recently had a big function, I think last week. He published, from what I can tell, is his last book. And he's been a very well-known individual in this particular field. We have Ziauddin Sardar, who is a British Pakistani, and he talked about Islamization of sciences. And we also had Ismail Farouqi. He passed away. He was assassinated. He was a Palestinian American. These four scholars wrote several books, but these are their main ones. So if you go to this, these four pictures land into their books. So on the left, we have Sayyid Hussein Nasr's Man and Nature. This book talks about stuff like ecotheology, how science is looking at the world in a very objectified way, whereas previously we had a more spiritual way of looking at it. And so we've made the earth a commodity as opposed to a relationship to which we're supposed to have, right? Prolegomena to the Metaphysics of Islam is a collection of various individual works that Naqib al-Attas wrote. It's a very good book. I also recommend his Islam and Secularism. Ziauddin Sardar, he's written several books, but this is, I think, one of his most important ones, Explorations in Islam and Science. And then finally, Ismail Farouqi, Islamization of Knowledge. This was his, action plan. How do we Islamize all of these knowledge domains? Now, it is not our purpose here today to look at what were their specific details. My only reason for sharing this with you is just to kind of put these guys on the map for you, saying that, these were the main people behind this discussion. They've had, a lot of publications under their name. They do have their respective criticisms for one another. And this is something that you may want to look into. But this was the first movement, the Islamization of the science. And this movement was very suspicious of the science that was coming in to the Muslim world. We then had another movement. So now we're looking at movement number 2 in the same era, which is the whole scientific miracles in the Quran movement. And this was very popular back in the day, right? So that we were finding all kinds of things in science, and they seem to be matching with what we find in Islamic scripture, right? The idea that iron is sent down, moon reflects light, mountains have roots, the Big Bang, all of these things excite a lot of people. And this movement was kicked off by none other than Maurice Bucaille. Maurice Bucaille was a very famous French scholar, and he was the physician of the royal family in Saudi Arabia at the time, right? He wrote this book called La Bible, La Quran et la Science. So excuse my French, I'm not French, and I don't speak French. But this was a book in which he compared the Bible, the Quran, in light of modern science, and he showed that the Quran was much, much better in aligning itself with modern science, and the Bible, in fact, had multiple errors. This book was eventually translated into multiple languages, but more than the book itself, it launched an entire movement. I think all of us remember we have pamphlets, we had conferences, we had dawah tapes, we had CDs, we had YouTube videos. I mean, this movement exploded. Oh, this movement went everywhere. And what's very interesting to see here is that in the 1980s, we have two movements. The Islamization of the science movement, which was very skeptical of modern science. And then we had the scientific miracle in the Quran, which is very pro-science. So from the beginning of Islam and science, the discourse at least, you see very opposite trends. This is very interesting for me when looking at it historically. So we move on to the 2000s and onwards. Both of these lines that we looked at, Islamization and the scientific miracles, are still debated and discussed today. Those things are still carrying on today. You'll find books and all kinds of things. However, 2000 and onwards, we begin to see now further maturity of Islam and science as a field. We have now various thinkers from various parts of the world with different areas of expertise who are looking into several areas within the interface of Islam and science. Because the field is still relatively new, the maturity of each interface varies. And that's why you will also find a lot of ikhtilaf, a lot of difference of opinions. My point is not to go into the micro details, but just to kind of give you a sketch of what kind of things people are looking into. One question that people have discussed in this area is, how do we look at the relationship between Islam and science? Is it one of conflict? Is it one of harmony? And here we have 3 books trying to articulate 3 different answers. That's one line that people are looking into. Another is physics. Quantum mechanics, is a theory that says that, particles, pop in and out of existence. Quantum physics has also been used to show that there is no God. Lawrence Krauss, he has a book called A Universe from Nothing, right? So physics is being heavily instrumentalized against religious people. What is the Islamic perspective on that? And here's we have one book by an Iraqi physicist. He's now in the UK, and he wrote what I think is one of the first books in this territory that I think tries to articulate what could be an Islamic interface when it comes to quantum mechanics. Okay. Evolution, in my opinion, is one of the most controversial topics. We recently had a conference at Cambridge, and there were some teachers there who presented. And they said that systematically across the board, evolution is definitely one of the questions that always comes up in these discussions. This is an area that I've contributed to along with many others. And I think out of all the interfaces in Islam and science, evolution is definitely the maturest. There's no doubt about it, in my opinion. And I think it's because it wraps many different considerations in one melting pot. It forces you to think about how you look at science and scripture. It forces you to think about human uniqueness. It forces you to think about things like naturalism, things like randomness. How do these things operate in nature? And us believing in God. So many different sensitivities are brought to one point, and I think that's why evolution has become a big discussion point. We also have very interesting developments in medicine. So there's a colleague of mine, Dr. Asim Padela. He has edited both of these books. Mashallah, very lovely individual and scholar. And so in medicine, we are now beginning to see a lot of exciting ideas that are forcing us to reconsider some of the Sharia, some of the applications, some of our ethical boundaries, right? So let me give you one example. There's this technology called ectogenesis. Ectogenesis is a very simple piece of tech. It means that you take the sex cell of the mother, sex cell of the father, put it together, and you put it inside this, let's just say, plastic bag, okay? And you seal the bag and you link it to a machine. And so over a period of 9 months, a machine feeds nutrients into this plastic bag, and so you see the baby grow. So this is, in effect, technology in which the baby is growing outside of the mother, right? Now, that is unprecedented. Can we do this kind of thing, right? Does the Sharia, allow this? Does the Sharia prohibit this? Why and how? And you can imagine that this will get tied up to social political adventures as well. Right now, in a very capitalistic society, there is, a lot of drive and greed towards money. And one obvious thing that comes out of this particular conversation, the idea of ectogenesis, is who will benefit the most if this technology is scaled up? And the clearest answer is corporations. Currently, corporations pay a lot of money for maternity leave, right? So not only do you have to pay, not only do you have to let somebody go while they're in pregnancy and labor and even after labor, but you also have to pay someone to replace them because their job cannot be taken away. So you have to find a replacement, and so this is very expensive. Now I can imagine a reality where corporations will want to invest in this and make this part of contracts, for instance. So you can see here, fiqh is going to have a lot of interesting adventures. This is just one example. There are many more. So that's one interface in Islam and science. Another interface, and this is a very popular one as well, I would say this is the second most popular one in Islam and science, is Islamic psychology. Malik Badri, he passed away. I think he is unarguably the founder of this field. So we have a lot of models, counseling models, psychotherapy models that are based on secular frameworks. Muslims believe that there's a spiritual dimension that human beings have. How do you cater for that? How do you try to help patients with that? That is an ongoing conversation. The most recent book in this territory is the one on the right-hand side, Dr. Abdullah Uthman. He is the principal of Cambridge Muslim College, and it's a very good book. I think it's one that you should definitely read. So this is another interface in this area. And finally, people have also written on the history of Islam and science. How did Islam and science develop? What are some of the impressions? How did science look like in our history, right? And this is a very important conversation because of things like Orientalism, colonialism, imperialism. A lot of the scientific contributions from the Islamic angle and from Islamic scholars seem to have been underplayed at least 100 years ago. So as a result of that, people thought that Muslims were barbaric, they lacked civilization, they're very stupid people. This is well recorded. These books are arguing against this and revising and correcting the narrative, showing that you guys never actually bothered looking into the Arabic manuscripts. You never bothered actually looking into the primary text. And there's a lot of stuff the Muslims have done and are still doing. And these books provide an excellent insight into some of these scholarship. So the whole Golden Age of Islam came out of some of this work. So these are 6 lines that I've given you examples of, right? Now, the question is, more relevant to GAIS now and its members, is how do you go about teaching Islam and science? How does this work in practice? So you've given us a theory, Shoaib, but how does this work in practice? You've given me an overview. What does it mean now for me as a teacher or as an administrator or as a school manager? So unfortunately, the news is not, too good, but not too bad either. It's kind of in between. It needs to be recognized that Islam and science is right now a budding field. It's not a developed field. Unfortunately, in comparison to Christian scholars, Muslims are still far behind in terms of having a proper infrastructure in place, courses and books. This doesn't mean there's nothing, but it just means that we have very limited resources. If you type in science religion on Amazon or on Google and you type in teaching resources, most of the stuff you'll find will be Christian-centric. These are some of the most popular books out there right now that give people some idea on how to teach science and religion. Every one of these are the three main ones right now. All of these are written from non-Muslim perspectives. And so there's now a push on people in the field to develop pedagogical materials that teachers can use. This does not mean that these books are not useful. It doesn't mean that. They can be useful, but they don't have Islamic sensitivities in place. So what we need to do is start developing in-house material. And to this end, alhamdulillah, things are coming about. I'm sharing with you some examples of courses that various people have developed, various institutions have developed. The first one is 5D Thinking. This is their website. 5D Thinking is run by a group of scholars who tried to take Sayyid Nursi. He's like a very famous scholar in Turkey. He passed away, but he's alive in the past century, and he's inspired several people in that region. And so they try to take his ideas and they've developed this curriculum, 5D Thinking. And so that's one option if you are interested in taking online courses. I know they do offline courses in various parts of the world as well. We also have Basir Education. This is run by Sheikh Hamza Karamali, who's a brilliant theologian, mashallah. He's somebody who, he went to the university, but then he went to the madrasa program, and mashallah, he's one of the top theologians in the world. Very, very humble individual. And he has a program called Why Islam is True. He has a textbook that accompanies this, which we'll look at shortly. But this is also a traditionally grounded curriculum that offers people to learn about how to navigate the boundaries of Islam and science. So you can see here, it even says at the bottom of Basir Education, religion, science, and culture. So it's trying to really help teachers and people and participants around the world to understand how to engage that conversation. Another one is Al-Balagh Academy. Al-Balagh Academy is one of the world's biggest online seminaries in the UK. The equivalent of this in the US is Mishkah University. I think that's the biggest US seminary, if I'm not mistaken. And they've also developed programs on Islam and science. This is one of them, the Quran and modern science. This is one that I'm doing for Mishkah. I did it last semester. So they have their own program as well. So you see here, various institutions are doing, courses on Islam and science. Do we have any reading materials? Yes, we do. These are some examples. Muzaffar Iqbal, who's in Canada, he is the president of the Center of Islamic Sciences, of Islam and Science, if I'm not mistaken. Him and his wife, they wrote this excellent book called Concentric Circles, and it's really good for helping you develop materials and how to foster curiosity in young children. Sayyid Hussein Nasr, the individual we looked at earlier, he has a book chapter on science education. Sheikh Omar Qureshi, he was at Zaytuna College, and he is another person who's done an excellent job. He's written a chapter for an edited volume on how to look at science from the Islamic perspective. Somebody, I don't know who these individuals are, but somebody took the framework of Naqib al-Attas, and they've done a good article on how to look at science education from his angle. And then I've also recently written an article as well that came out this year. So this presentation slide, inshallah, will be shared, so you can find those links in there as well, inshallah. So there is some material out there, right? Now, what kind of projects have we undertaken so far? In this past year, myself and a few others from Cambridge University, we hosted a series of workshops in different parts of the world. So on the left, you can see a poster. We did a workshop for 4 different regions, right? So we did one for North and South America, Africa and Europe, Asia, and then we've had one for the Middle East and Asia. And so what we were able to achieve through all of this is we were able to showcase the various challenges and the opportunities and the state of affairs in Islam and science at the pedagogical level. We've had a lot of interactions with teachers across the world. So it was a fabulous learning experience for myself as well as for my team members. And we kind of understand now where things are and what people are trying to do in different parts of the region. More recently, this past July, late June, early July, we had a conference at the University of Cambridge looking at how we can develop material for Islam and science and education. We had people who were teaching at madrasas. We had people who were teaching at high schools. We had people who were teaching at universities. We had theoreticians as well as practitioners. And that was the really interesting part for this conference. And so this is now, the kind of stuff that we took in the past. That's great. What does it mean for us in practice? Well, there are some projects that are underway that will hopefully provide further resources for teachers across the world, inshallah. The first one that I want to bring to your attention is a project called Fostering Connections Between Science and Theology for Medical Track Muslim Students. Dr. Asam Padella and Dr. Abdul Razak Hashi. Asam Padella is in Medical Wisconsin College in the US. Dr. Hashi is in one of the universities in Malaysia. Together, they were awarded a $700,000 project from John Templeton Foundation. And what they're doing in this project is they're looking at 6 areas within biology that create an interface with Islamic thought. So this includes stuff like evolution, AI, genetics, right? Transhumanism, those kinds of things. And we have, I was a part of this project, and Sheikh Omar Qureshi and Sheikh Hamza Karamali are also a part of the project. And what we've done is we've created like courses, like mini courses for each one of these. And we have tested this in the US market as well as in the Malaysian market. And after testing them out, we're going to now learn from our experience what worked, what didn't work, and hopefully get pedagogical research out there for free, inshallah. So this will be coming out soon. Sheikh Hamza Karamali, he is the founder of Basir Education, the institution that I showed earlier. He has a textbook, Why Islam is True. The first edition was released a while ago. The second edition is coming out. It's a much more enhanced, improved version. So that is also something you can look up to. We also have 2 more things that are being written by myself. One is a textbook on Islam and evolution. This will be coming out for free. And this is an accessible, jargon-free work that can hopefully help teachers and students look at how to manage the relationship between Islam and science. It doesn't give you answers, it gives you possible frameworks. And then finally, a teaching guide that I'm developing on how to manage Islam and evolution. Both of these are coming out with Routledge. So I've thrown a lot of resources at you, right? And I'm trying to do that because I'm trying to, give you some signposting to what's out there and what people are working on at the moment. Do not think that this is an exhaustive list. There are many things that I may have missed out, but that's available on my radar. And I hope that, inshallah, you can inform me of things that are happening in other parts of the world. Right. For me, and this is where I just like to offer some of my insights. I've spoken to various teachers, institutional body heads, right? Like Islam, for instance, from many different parts of the world. And I'm just sharing some of my experiences that I think are going to be challenges when it comes to teaching Islam and science, particularly at the high school level. The high school level is very challenging on its own. I'm aware that as a high school teacher, I was a high school teacher as well. I used to teach physics and chemistry and mathematics, and it was a nightmare. you grade 8, 9, and 10, astaghfirullah al-azim. Oh my days, the stories I can tell you. I remember I walked into a classroom once, and so this was a segregated school, right? So boys and girls in different department, and the boys, right? The boys, they were playing cards, their legs were up, So, I remember. So I can imagine that high schools can be very, very difficult places to teach. A lot of disciplinary action sometimes needs to be taken. But so I'm aware that teaching at a high school is difficult. The teacher is requested to be a funny person. They're required to do emotional guidance. They're required to teach the curriculum. They're constrained by, the time period, the scheduling, and administrative duties come. And the teacher is torn. The teacher is absolutely torn. So I completely sympathize with that, right? However, in my experience with talking to various teachers from around the world, as well as administrators, I think the fundamental challenge here is when it comes to teaching Islam and science are information gaps. A lot of these discussions in Islam and science require you to have a strong understanding of theology in particular, so aqidah. Like how do you understand aqidah? Because aqidah is the subject that grounds everything. Aqidah is a subject that tells you what is the nature of God, what is the nature of creation, how do you manage that relationship. So it's a very important exercise, and it also gives you insights into how to understand Quran and Hadith. Right? That's why it's called usul ad-din. It's the primary foundation of your religion. If you don't have, depth or insightful knowledge in this area, it becomes very difficult to manage a lot of these questions. And so one challenge is that there are theological information gaps in teachers. The other challenge that I found is that most teachers sometimes don't even know how to understand the science. So for evolution, for example, there's a lot of research on evolution which says that the teachers who are teaching evolution sometimes don't understand what evolution actually is. They make some mistakes, even when stuff comes to quantum mechanics and what have you. So there is information gaps on the science side as well as the theological side. So that's one challenge on the teaching front. The other thing that I wanted to highlight was on the infrastructural level, and this is me speaking to, this is after me speaking to administrators, and me getting insights from them. There are issues on the infrastructure level, such that we usually pump in a lot of money and we pay very well for teachers who teach science, for teachers who teach English, right? But when it comes to our Islamic studies teachers, usually the salaries are very low and we don't offer good packages, right? So why is that? Why is the bar so low for Islamic studies? I remember speaking to a couple people where you didn't even need to have qualifications to sign up for a high school. And so what ends up happening is we sometimes get very amateurish people who don't know enough, and they get put into these positions that can sometimes cause a lot of damage. I remember meeting one administrator head. I cannot say who that person is, but I know that person is aware of GAIS, right? That person mentioned to me that they received comments from students, who graduated from these schools. And sometimes they say that the Islamic schools are sometimes the worst place to actually acquire Islamic knowledge because they weren't actually taught properly. Sometimes the expression that was used was a straight track to atheism. Now, of course, this is not me generalizing across the board, but I'm saying that as institutions, if you are heads of institutions, we need to start thinking about what kind of qualification criteria are we having when it comes to our Islamic teachers, and whether we are attracting them. Are we raising the bar? Are we giving them the same perks as we are the other teachers? Because I've seen it even in the Middle East, where mashallah, the A levels for sciences and mathematics, they get really high salaries. The Islamic studies ones on the low end. Why? Why is that there? If Islam is one of the most central things for us to learn, why do we give it such cheap evaluations? And so I think these are two challenges that I think we need to face. And I think that these are also opportunities, in a sense that it should help us revise our understanding what it means to run an Islamic school. But also, I hope that it gives teachers some bearing to understand that I'm aware that you're already overloaded, but there should be some strive to actually acquire and understand some of these things. Like I said, there are many resources out there. There are many courses out there as well. And it will go a long way to familiarize yourself, at least at a basic level, with how to navigate these conversations. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for listening to me. The takeaway points are finally, these three things. One, keep in mind that Islamic science is a very nascent field. It's still developing. And the pedagogical material, unfortunately, is not at the same level as the amount of literature that's out there. But this is being addressed. And finally, I hope that this prompts teachers and institutions to really think about how to go forward from here, investing into teacher training, as well as an institutional reframing of how we need to better ourselves by really giving our teachers their izzah, and by improving the standards of our teaching in the high schools, inshallah. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that that was helpful. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Shoaib. There's one question from one of the viewers. They're saying, where's the link for that book, please, the evolution one? So if you could share where could they find your book, inshallah?
Which book is this?
The Islam and evolution one.
So there are many Islam and evolution books. Which one are you referring to?
Yeah, they're talking about your book.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you just type in Islam and Evolution Shoaib, my book is open access. It's for free. You can find it free online. But I'd say for teachers in particular, you can find the article that I recommended for this particular session. It's meant to be a very accessible article for teachers. Very accessible, jargon free. The book is dense. It's 140,000 words. So I would recommend not reading that unless you're very invested in the topic of evolution. So that article is really accessible. It's trial and tested. I gave it to many teachers to read it before I submitted it for publication. So have a look at that, inshallah.
Inshallah. Since I belong to an Islamic school as well, I'm leading the administrative and the academic teams at a school. the issue, we at times we want to find that sweet spot, you
Yeah.
know, where science, being introduced as, the all-knowing field, and then, where do you think is that sweet spot where we can engage that curiosity in the students, at the same time, link them very strongly to the Islamic identity and the Islamic aqaid?
Okay, so I will address this from many perspectives, right? The best student teacher ratio is 1 to 10 maximum. That's the maximum. How many of our schools actually do that? It's usually 20, 30. So just on that management level, just how you manage a class becomes so difficult. Number one, that's the first thing, right? So I think we really need to evaluate how we actually give quality to our students. Number two, when it comes to developing curiosity, what happens sometimes is that it for most, I think in my experience, is that it becomes about finishing the syllabus, finish the syllabus, right? And I think we don't have enough time to actually allow people to discuss, to have a dialogical interaction in class. And that's because of the nature of the setup of school structure, that you have 45 minutes, you've got to cover this. This is the lesson plan. You do not leave this lesson plan, you finish this lesson plan, and then you move on, right? And so I think that human beings are not boxes. They are not boxed people. And I think that's the reason why when we just finish through the syllabus, all we're doing, we finish the checklist. Because if we don't finish the checklist, it affects our KPIs. And if it affects our KPIs, our evaluation of the school goes down. That's what happens. Everything is standardized from top to down. And I think this becomes a challenge, that if you have a top down administrative checklist, then where's the freedom of the students for dialogical interaction, right? And I think that's one of the key ingredients that I find missing. I've taught thousands of students both in science and humanities and in theology. And this is a common observation I see. For them, it's about, what do I need to pass the exam? The curiosity is gone because they've been drilled that I just need to get the grade so I can get to a good university, and that's it. But the actual curiosity is never there. Something has gone wrong in the institutional setup. That's what I feel. That's what I see. My son goes to school, and I'm noticing this as well. So I say this as a parent as well as an educator. So I think that what we need to really do is we need to provide spaces in which curiosity can be created, right? And one of the ways that I think that can be done is by just taking even students out to the environment. I really like some of these modern schools in which teaching is happening not in a classroom, in a four-wall classroom, just out in the garden. Cambridge Muslim College, for example, they regularly have classes not in the class but outside. They have classes outside around a fire, right? And just having that ability to break down that institutional structure a little bit, having that flexibility really helps psychologically. As for creating curiosity, it should be problem driven, not material driven. So if you start by asking questions, getting students engaged, that invites curiosity. But if it's knowledge dumping, pedagogy of the oppressed, right? Paul Freire, right? If you're just banking information, and most of the times teachers have to bank information, you've got a curriculum to finish. You'll be criticized otherwise, right? You're not going to get a lot out of it. And so I think there are really strong issues with regards to how we are infrastructurally. And it's very easy for me to complain. I admit that. It's very easy for me to stand to the side. This is an institutional problem. The question is, how do you get out of it? And this is something that I'm dealing with. How do you realistically allow curiosity driven? And I think it comes down to within these limitations, teacher training. How can you add small tidbits here and there that can allow students to develop? I think having some opportunities to have question-based lessons will be very good. That'll be one thing. The other thing is have opportunities where students can learn outside the class. That they grow a lot through that. I don't know if you know Khan Academy, but Khan Academy is doing something super phenomenal right now. Really phenomenal stuff. Because of the capitalistic enterprise, schooling is boxed up because societies want to know how many students do we have coming out, so that they can see, okay, we have this many engineers, this many scientists, this many doctors. It's easy to manage people when you box people up, right? But when you box and standardize everything, there are some people that grow faster than the others. Some people are smarter than the other, and each one has different needs and demands. You cannot scale that at a mass level. It's impossible to scale. But now with artificial intelligence, that's now easier to do. So what is Khan Academy doing? They're now providing AI help through their interfaces, where each student will be given specific feedback based on how they are addressing and engaging with the material. That is something that I think will help, because it's no longer, curriculum based learning. It is actually mastery based learning. We tune the teaching requirement according to the demand of each student, not a class anymore. I think that provides an opportunity where hopefully I think we can see some development and a positive injection of AI into the Islamic syllabus or in Islamic study, Islamic schools, inshallah. I don't know if that addressed your question, but those are all the thoughts that came to my mind.
Definitely, inshallah. Since you said that talked about the class structure and the boxing of education, I've talked to many educators and so many people across the world. They realize all these issues, whether it be Muslims or whether it be non-Muslims alike. They realize these issues. However, we seem to be, this seems to be less of an educational issue, and it becomes like a communal issue.
Yep.
So social issue. Schools have now become a social reality instead of a educational reality.
Yeah.
So these are issues that go beyond the educational scope. So I as a person would be very much interested in knowing that what is the solution that I can give to my students, I can give to my society, inshallah. And you've talked about science and Islam and education and all of that, mashallah, with your achievements. Just a personal level question: what triggered all of this?
Oh, what triggered my interest in Islam?
This curiosity, was it a teacher? Was it parents? Was it society? What was it?
What actually drove me to this was my first. So I just finished my second PhD in theology. In my first PhD in engineering, I had a supervisor. His name is Sean Rigby. He was an atheist. He still is an atheist, if I'm not mistaken. But believe it or not, he actually helped me towards this. So I was a very cultural Muslim. I didn't know much about Islam. So, we know the Quls, we know Surah Fatiha, and that's it. And I know we used to go Jummah every Friday. That's it. That was the extent of my knowledge of Islam. And during my PhD, my supervisor knew I was Muslim. And he kept asking me questions about Islam, like, why do you believe in the Prophet? I'm like, who's the Prophet? That was the height of my knowledge. I didn't even know who the Prophet was, right? And so he asked me questions, and I started thinking about them quite a lot. And then that kind of led me to going on courses, studying with shuyukh and all of that. And I got to know my religion much, much more. And by the end of the PhD, I knew that I didn't want to go into chemical engineering anymore. Now, if you're from a Pakistani background, if you want to tell your parents you don't want to engineer anymore, it's as if you've committed haram, al-akbar. This is you're going to be excommunicated from the family. So I had a very difficult conversation. I told them, look, I've done the engineering degree, right? But I don't want to be an engineer. I want to go into this area. I remember my dad was very upset because, spending so long in engineering studies, and now you want to switch. I'm like, yes, I want to switch. So since then, since 2015, I've just been studying and really going down philosophy and theology, and that has been an eye-opening game. In the sense that because I got to know my religion better, but more than that, I got to see what I did not know and how valuable it is to know these things. And more so because it is really impacting a lot of the Muslim youth. The amount of youth that I've come across now who are leaving Islam because of evolution it's unbelievable. I have two families who spoke to me. Kids are in Cambridge, right? Kids are in Cambridge, but they've never been trained in Islamic theology, never had access. They're not atheists. Just last week, I got an email from the States. This one Muslim guy he was from an MSA, I think. He said that his friend left Islam because of evolution. Can we have a chat with you? So for me, this has real world impact. This is not something that's just theoretical up in the air. This has real term impact on people. And these are, strong shubahat. And I think what happened is that we rely a lot on things to kind of take care of themselves. And I think that is a very dangerous assumption to make. I think that the Islamophobia industry is very strong. It's very advanced. And we need to take that quite seriously. because if it is causing our children to leave, and some of them might be even closet atheists, right? Then we need to have a real look at ourselves in terms of how much are we advancing ourselves. There are two books that I'd recommend for all the teachers here and the parents if they're looking at it, at this video. One is called Arabs Without God. Brian Whitaker is the author. The other one is called The Unbelievers by Simon Cotty. So these books do the same thing, but in different contexts. The Unbelievers it reviews ex-Muslims, ex-Muslim atheists in US, Canada, America, and Australia. The other one, Arabs Without God, does the same thing, but in the Middle East, right? UAE, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and what have you. And it tries to identify the reasons why Muslims leave Islam. And there are many reasons. There are many reasons. You know, some of them, they say that they had parents who left Islam because they're something else on the outside, something else on the inside at home. Some of them talked about emotional abuse. Some of them talk about 9/11 impacted them. One common denominator in both books was science, Richard Dawkins, evolution, right? So these are real term things. They have real impact on the ground. And that even gave me further motivation to look into this. So I have dedicated my personal life, like I killed my engineering career just so I can look into this full time. And I'm glad I'm doing that, because for me, I feel that this is severely needed. More so now that I have my son. I think when you're not a parent, I mean, you can think about parenthood, whatever you want, but when you do become a parent, it changes your life completely. And so when I held my son and I saw him and I started, because mothers become mothers 9 months earlier, but fathers become fathers after 9 months later, right? And so when I saw that I have a son, I have a duty, it just motivated me even more. So for me, this is an investment. It's a khidmat to the ummah, and I'm trying my best. I'm working with other people as best as I can to really create an infrastructure where we have accessible material that can really help the people on the ground. Because I do believe that what happens is in academia, things stay in the ivory towers and it just stays there. It doesn't trickle down to society. But I think that's not the job of an academic. You should definitely do this stuff here, but you should also help it trickle down. Now, that's what I'm trying to do through some of the work that I'm doing. Inshallah, I'll accept it.
Jazakallah khair. And one reason why I asked this was, we need to motivate more people to, opt for this field. As you said, that this is a budding field. This is a growing field. We need to invest ourselves, have people be invested in these fields so that we can have more people taking up Islam and science uh, uh, to a very lower level, just for the teachers here. So there's a teacher in one part of the world teaching science, and that they're teaching science through whatever sources that are available. Of course, they're from a very Western or very secular point of view.
Yep.
What advice do you have for that particular teacher? How can you deliver? We've had the integration model where we integrate science with Islam. So we teach the secular model and then we top it up with a verses here and there. Would that work, or it has to be integrated in a way that it is coherent?
Yeah. So I think you're referring to ayah sprinkling. You sprinkle ayahs on the scientific books. Yeah. So that's yeah. So I definitely believe that ayah sprinkling doesn't work. I think that's a very superficial. Not to disrespect the Quran. No one is disrespecting the Quran. Always, reading the Quran, reciting the Quran is always beneficial. But when you want to have a meaningful relationship and a meaningful understanding between Islam and science, that will not work. If you think that will solve that issue, it will not solve the issue. So that's one thing that I've seen. Another thing that I've seen is that you just teach Islam and that's it. And you think that the sciences will take care of themselves. Those are two extremes that I think need to be curtailed. I don't think either model is going to work. What we need to do is we need to have, so let me be clear here. I don't believe in one approach. I believe all these models have some, something going for them. Some of them are better in some situations, some are better in other situations. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. I don't think there's the solution. I think there's many solutions. And you have to see on your context which one is going to work. So in that case, I'm a pluralist. I believe in plurality of approaches. And so depending on the nature of the institution, whether it's a seminary, whether it's a school, whether it's a university, and depending on which age group and how much, how well are they financially, what is the curriculum? Is it a US curriculum? Is it an IB curriculum? Is it an ALA curriculum? It really does depend on the variables. And I don't think that there is one solution to all of this. What I will stress, however, and this is me saying this coming out from the science background, is that I think the fundamental thing that needs to be taught that is missing in a lot of cases is theology. If you do not have a backbone in theology, and I'm talking about not theology in a very rudimentary sense. I'm not talking about your basic, believe in Allah, believe in Iman, the six pillars of faith, Arkan al-Iman. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about really sitting down with shuyukh and learning your creed. How do you prove God's existence? This is one of the first things you learn in creed. The first things you learn. How do you know that the Prophet ﷺ is telling the truth? Why do you believe in the Quran Hadith? Those are foundational things you learn. Once you know that, at least you have some grounding to help you. When you don't have that, it literally is you're like a leaf. If the wind blows this way, you're going to go that way. If the wind blows that way, you're going to go that way. If you don't have that grounding, it becomes very, very difficult. So I think that's one requisite that I think must be strongly embedded in all of these courses. Number two, I think creating a culture of dealing with ikhtilaf. One of the problems that I think there is that one-way highway. This mentality needs to die. So I met, for example, when I spoke to one school administrator. We have different madhab in fiqh. We have Shafi'is, we have Hanbalis, we have Hanafis, we have Malikis. Even in Aqidah, we have three madhabs: Ash'ari, Maturidi, and the Athari paradigm. Right? There are three madhabs, even in Aqidah. Now, these will have their respective differences, just like you have respective differences in fiqh, right? But the problem is sometimes that we get so locked in that we only teach them one madhab without explaining to them there are other valid opinions as well. And then this becomes a means where people just get shadowed into one box of thinking, and when they see a different opinion or a different practice, they get worried, or they don't know how to deal with that. So we have to create a culture of difference of opinion and a way of helping our students deal with this in reality. If you teach them one-minded thinkingness in classroom, they will not be able to engage with the complexity of reality. I remember when I was so in Kuwait, right? I was born and raised in Kuwait. We were taught the Shafi'i madhab, because even though my parents are Pakistani, I was taught the Shafi'i madhab, right? So you pray in a particular way. And I remember when I went to Pakistan for the first time, right? So in Pakistan, you say, we don't say that, right? So that loud. I mean, it was shocking to me. Like I didn't know why are people, why are they not saying that? In the Shafi'i method, you say it loud. In Hanafi, you don't. So I was a little bit confused. When I went to the UK for my studies, I saw different methods. I saw some people praying to the side, right? Like, why are you keeping your hands to the side? Why are they not on your chest? And it was difficult. It was a difficult thing to understand. And that's because I was never trained. And when I asked the administrator, what are you doing about different methods? He's like, no, parents only want their children to be taught one method only. Make it easy for the students. That's not making it easy. That's making it easy for your emotional management of the student. The hard thing is giving them the ability to understand that there can be more than one way of looking at the same thing. And they can be valid. They can be valid at the same time. If we don't create that culture of ambiguity, so there's a really good book by Thomas Baer. It's a really good book. It says Islam did a very good job at domesticating ambiguity, and that's why you were able to have very harmonious ikhtilaf. But when you just teach one-dimensional thinking, you will have issues with students engaging with the complexities of reality. So that's the second advice. So the first is aqeedah, the second is dealing with ikhtilaf, being able to deal with that and embed that in the students. My son is 6 years old, right? And sometimes we'll have a debate. So he's very strong-minded, right? He's like a horse like that. He's like a bull sometimes. And we will chat sometimes, right? And we will say, okay, Jonah, why do you think you're right? His name is Jonah, right? So, and he then gives his opinion. Like, okay, I believe that you're wrong because of this. It's like, I can see that, Daddy. It's like, I can see your point as well. And that creates that culture of, okay, maybe there are different ways of thinking about things. That's very, very important. One-way track mindedness is very bad, in my opinion. That needs to die. That point needs to die from our mentality. Finally, number 3 is to help people understand that not having an answer now does not mean you go into anxiety. Muslims are being attacked left, right, center. This is the nature of the situation, okay? But why is our first response, oh, my faith, my Islam is going to die? No, that should not be. That means that person's tarbiyah was not done properly. That means that they were not trained to deal with new questions. This links to point number 2. So what we need to do is we need to have emotional inculcation, emotional training. That if you have something you don't know, don't worry. Sometimes the answer will come immediately. Sometimes it will take some time. Sometimes it will never come. Right? Sometimes, even now, there's some answers in Islamic thought which we do not have any answer for. Why is zakat 2.5%? We don't know. No alim in the world can tell you. No one can tell you. Zero alim in the world can tell you. We don't have any answer to that. No one has an answer to that. So that tells us, from the very get go, there are things that we will never know, and that's fine. That is fine. The problem is if we don't teach students how to how to deal with ambiguity, how to deal with not having an answer, it puts them under anxiety mode. And when you have constant doubts being thrown at them, if they don't have that emotional tolerance, it's game over, right? It's game over. So my advice would be to really focus on this. And this is the part that is part of the hidden curriculum or the implicit curriculum in schools. And we need to create that cultivation of dealing with ikhtilaf, dealing with ambiguity, dealing with unknowability. Those are, I think, very important. Wallahu a'lam.
Inshallah. There's a comment from one of the viewers, and that is, there is an inherent fear and discomfort in learning about other things. It comes from the parents certain times, it comes from the school management, sometimes it comes from the very people who founded the institution.
Yeah.
So uh, it was something that if I look at myself, uh, years and years back, and it took me some time to unlearn that. For me, qat'i knowledge was something that I want, and not appreciating the zanni element of it, the gray areas, and those gray areas, they instead of making Islam repulsive, actually they beautify Islam. The areas where we have the difference of opinions, it actually beautifies Islam.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, it needs to be made clear in case I was misunderstood. I'm not saying everything goes. I mean, no one as a Muslim goes, I believe in two gods today. Yeah, that's fine. That's valid. No, there's a scope of validity. There's a scope of validity. Every religion has a scope of validity. But once you establish that validity, allow people to understand that there are going to be perhaps different opinions in this scope. If we don't deliver that to our students, they will not be, because this is not just in Islam, it's human activity. Humans will face complexity. The boxed up thinking that we have in schools is just in schools. It does not map into reality. And I think that's one of the things that we need to work on. We need to not be worried about showing them how to deal with complexity. And if we can do that, we've already trained their mindset to thinking, okay, one way is not the only way, or there's not just one way at looking at things. That's the point here.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair, Dr. Shoaib. It was lovely having you on this show, and it has certainly given us all, educators, administrators, teachers, it has given us all a lot of homework to do, uh, to see, to delve into this field, inshallah. And we would be very happy to have you again at any of the forums of GIS. And just a reminder to all of the viewers out there, inshallah, we'll have a GIS leadership retreat in Durban, in South Africa, in the beginning of October, inshallah. You may go to our website and look into that, inshallah, as well. Again, I'm so happy that we had this session, and I'm sure it will be very beneficial for all of those who attended, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much.
Barakallah feek. If I said anything wrong, please do forgive me. If I offended anyone, please do forgive me. Anything that was beneficial, it came directly from Allah. Barakallah feek. Thank
inshallah. You. Barakallah. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام عليكم.